A warm welcome. You're tuned into Iron Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi. These are the top stories on the continent. Liberia's Supreme Court halts Tuesday's presidential runoff over accusations of fraud, the decision throwing the country's first democratic transition in 7 decades into uncertainty. Officials in DR Congo say long-awaited presidential polls will go ahead next December, but opinions remain deeply divided. We'll have reactions from the opposition and the government in Kinshasa. And the Red Cross reveals that an estimated $6 million of money supposed to fight Ebola was wasted due to fraud. We bring you details from the aid agency on how it all happened. But first, just 1 day before it was due to go ahead, Liberia's Supreme Court has halted a presidential runoff to investigate accusations of fraud. It comes following complaints of irregularities by the opposition Liberty Party. The former international footballer George Weah and incumbent Vice President Joseph Boakai were scheduled to face off on Tuesday. Well, that decision throws Liberia's first democratic transition in 70 years into uncertainty, as France 24's Clément Bonnereau now explains.
A decision that throws Liberia into uncertainty. The Supreme Court says the presidential runoff cannot proceed until the Electoral Commission has investigated claims of irregularities and fraud. The allegations were made by Charles Brumskin of the Liberty Party, who came third in the first round on October 10th.
The NEC is stopped and prohibited from conducting a runoff election until the complaint filed by the petitioners is investigated by the NEC and, if need be, the appropriate appeal process to the Supreme Court of Liberia is availed of and the matter is decided by the Supreme Court.
Ex-football star George Weah and Vice President Joseph Boakai were due to go head-to-head on Tuesday after winning 38% and 29% of the vote, respectively, in the first round. Charles Brumskin of the Liberty Party, however, says there's been widespread fraud and irregularities. He accuses President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of interference because she met electoral officials before the vote.
We believe that it's the interest of our country and the people of Liberia that will stop the process at this point in time and have a rerun of the elections.
The Unity Party's Joseph Boakai also says the election was rigged. He accuses President Sirleaf of secretly being in favour of George Weah, an accusation Weah's CDC party denies.
We do not believe the elections were perfect, but we think it was an election that could serve the purpose of ascertaining the will of the Liberian people. Everything the will of the Liberian people was clear in that elections. That is in favour of the CDC.
The Electoral Commission has until the 22nd of November to examine the case. No new date has been set for the poll.
In other news, officials in DR Congo say long-awaited presidential elections are set to go ahead in December 2018. Now, the country's Electoral Commission recently announced that polls couldn't take place until 2019, this owing to violence in the Kasai region and some logistical obstacles. But as France 24's Thomas Nicolon now reports, bringing the election date forward is unlikely to ease tensions in Kinshasa.
When it comes to politics, people in Congo are no stranger to delays. The presidential election was due to be held in 2016 before being pushed back to late 2017 and finally December 2018. The Electoral Commission took the decision, which has sparked mixed reactions.
As a Congolese citizen, I'm unhappy about this decision because the population suffers. We'd like the election to be held as soon as possible before the date that was decided.
At least now we have a date, even though it was supposed to take place this very year. But we'll give them one last chance. We'll see if in 2018 there really is an election.
The schedule announced by the Electoral Commission on Sunday has already been rejected by the opposition, who still wants Joseph Kabila to step down by the end of the year.
This electoral schedule goes against the Constitution, civil rights and common sense. It simply shows that the Electoral Commission and the government have no intention to hold the election.
The government says the opposition's demands are irresponsible.
In DR Congo, the president can only leave power if there's a newly elected president. The opposition knows it. Their attitude has one aim: to create chaos, because it seems it's the only way they've found to exist in public opinion.
No more suspense surrounding the date for DR Congo's presidential elections, but analysts warn that tensions ahead of the poll risk running high.
The former Kenyan MP Harun Mwaa has filed a petition at the Supreme Court challenging the results of last month's presidential rerun. Well, the petition came hours before a deadline expired and could trigger a legal challenge to President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election. The court nullified Kenyatta's win on August the 8th polls, but the president won repeat elections in October, which were boycotted by the opposition. Well, the court now has until November the 14th to rule on election petitions. Zimbabwe's leader, Robert Mugabe, has sacked his vice president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, for showing what he said were traits of disloyalty. The news, which was announced by the country's information minister, provides a boost for Mugabe's wife, Grace, who's seen as a potential successor to her husband. On Sunday, Mrs Mugabe accused Mnangagwa of being a coup plotter and a coward. The 75-year-old Mnangagwa had been a leading candidate to succeed Mugabe. Now, the Red Cross says it's uncovered fraudulent activity by officials during efforts to fight West Africa's deadly Ebola outbreak in 2014 to 2016. That fraud is estimated to have cost $6 million. Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Jamila Mahmood of the IFRC, who's Under-Secretary General for Partnerships. I asked her how fraud on such a large scale was possible.
First of all, we're outraged that this happened. What actually happened was, after Ebola operations, and in any operations that we do, we actually do a full audit of the programs and operations, and we discovered there were some red flags. And that led us to launch a full in-depth investigation into the different Ebola countries that were affected countries. In Liberia, what we found was there was fraudulent activity in procurement. In Sierra Leone, there was fraudulent activity with bank rates with the exotic currency of the Sierra Leone. We found that there could be a collusion with a bank to actually use a wrong exchange rate for these operations. And in Guinea, there was fraudulent activity likely around customs clearance by a third party. So all these investigations obviously were done by us internally, as well as with other partners like Pricewaterhouse and KPMG. And what we've done now is move forward to take this to the relevant state authorities and also bring in legal procedures and possible criminal prosecution for these perpetrators. And I just want to reiterate, these are individuals who have committed the crime. There's not the whole society that is a problem. But nonetheless, this is unacceptable.
Togo civil society is preparing to join forces with the opposition for fresh nationwide demonstrations. Over the last few weeks, a popular protest movement has been calling for President Faure Gnassingbé to resign. At least 20 people have died in clashes. The violence has also displaced hundreds of people, many of whom have sought refuge in neighbouring Ghana. Our correspondent sent us this report.
They walked more than 9 hours to reach Chereponi, the nearest village from the Ghanaian border. A poor, landlocked area where living conditions are extremely difficult for more than 600 refugees. There's no reception camp here. These Togolese fled their homes in Mango and Bafilo on September 21st at the height of the military crackdown on local populations.
The dormitory is not big enough for everyone to sleep there. Hundreds are crammed into the room. Others are forced to sleep in the city. Their safety is not guaranteed.
Refugees fear that Togolese soldiers may follow them to Ghana. The border remains porous, even though it's now closed.
We are from the same ethnic group. There's only one river separating us, so they will stay here until the situation there is resolved. They're in good hands.
Due to a lack of space for families, women were separated from men, and we were not allowed to film them for security reasons. Some are the wives of opposition activists. Many are terrified. This trader injured himself while trying to escape the military in Mango. He's accused by the authorities of shooting a child.
I fled because the military shot the kid in front of me. As they feared I would speak, they wanted to arrest me, saying that it was me who shot the child.
He too fears for his life. He shared images of violence by the armed forces with the media. It's impossible for him to go back to his home.
The situation is calm, but that doesn't mean it's safe. Every day there, people are being harassed.
Refugees do not receive any help beyond that of villagers who are already very poor. But that day, a Togolese woman, a political activist in exile for 23 years in Ghana, brings more than 2 tons of food.
There is no humanitarian organization on the spot. They're totally abandoned.
Refugee numbers could rise again in case of reprisals against a stronger popular protest in northern Togo.
The Iron Africa team will be back in about 50 minutes' time here on France 24. Up next, Mark Owen's here with more international headlines. Stay tuned.